Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India Live, India's voice to the world. I am Prasar Bharati. Coming up in the next 30 minutes. Death toll rises to 132 and over 150 people injured after devastating earthquake in Nepal. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi expresses grief and readiness to help. Israel refuses to agree to a temporary ceasefire until the release of over 240 hostages. US Arab leaders to meet in Jordan over Gaza conflict. In Cricket World Cup, New Zealand faces Pakistan in Bengaluru while Ashes rivals Australia and England lock horns in Ahmedabad. Nepal's Prime Minister Pushpa Kamal Dahal on Saturday visited survivors of a strong earthquake which has left over 130 dead and dozens more injured in the Himalayan nation. Dahal offered condolences and support to people who had been evacuated to a shelter in Jajarkot, western Nepal, after their homes were destroyed. He also appealed everyone concerned to help with the rescue and relief efforts. The 6.4 magnitude earthquake struck Nepal's Jajarkot and Rukum district at around midnight. The tremor was felt in surrounding districts and as far as in capital city Kathmandu as well. Police has said 92 people have been confirmed dead in Jajarkot and 36 in Rukum West. All the security forces in the two districts have been mobilized in the search and rescue work. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has expressed grief over the loss of lives and damage due to the earthquake in Nepal. In a tweet, he said, "India stands in solidarity with the people of Nepal and is ready to extend all possible assistance. Our thoughts are with the bereaved families and we wish the injured a quick recovery." Meanwhile, India's External Affairs Ministry has released emergency number in Nepal for Indians requiring assistance due to recent earthquakes in the Himalayan region. The number is being flashed on your television screen. India's External Affairs Ministry has now released an emergency number for Indians requiring assistance, and this is a number which is there on the screen right now. And the director of National Center for Seismology said that the intensity of the tremors in Nepal were strong, but when it came to Delhi, it reduced. Take a listen.
Very strong intensity at Nepal. But when you come to Delhi here, Delhi is in this side, okay? So you come to Delhi, then you see it was the reduced, okay? It come to Delhi, it was the reduced. And it was in between there. Here is somewhere Delhi, okay? So here is the Delhi. So it was in between 3 and 4, 4 and 5 in between. There was this and this color, surf blue color. Okay. So that's why because of this 4 and 5 intensity is about perceptible intensity. So intensity is the degree of shaking. But magnitude 6.4 is the content of energy. Earthquake does not kill the people. It is the structure that kills the people.
Updates now on the Israel-Hamas conflict. As the war between Israel and Hamas enters its 29th day, the Israeli Prime Minister has rejected calls for a humanitarian pause in the Gaza region. The Israeli military has continued to exchange fire with Hamas terrorists in Gaza.
The Israel-Hamas conflict remains unresolved, with Israel refusing to agree to a temporary ceasefire until the release of over 240 hostages taken by Hamas during their attack on October 7th.
We are proceeding with all our might, and Israel refuses any temporary ceasefire that does not include the return of our kidnapped hostages. Israel will not permit the transfer of fuel to the Gaza Strip and opposes the transfer of funding to Gaza.
In a recent tragic incident, an airstrike on an ambulance in Gaza led to the loss of several lives. The Israeli army has claimed that the ambulance was being used by a Hamas terrorist cell, and they took action to neutralize the threat. On the international front, US Secretary of State Antony Blinken, during his second visit to Israel, urged Israel to allow humanitarian pauses in the ongoing conflict with Hamas in Gaza.
Even as we work toward progress on each of these urgent needs, we're focused on setting the conditions for a durable and sustainable peace and security. The United States continues to believe that the best viable path, indeed the only path, is through a two-state solution. That's the only guarantor of a secure Jewish and democratic Israel, the only guarantor of Palestinians realizing their legitimate right to live in a state of their own, enjoying equal measures of security, freedom, opportunity, and dignity. The only way to end a cycle of violence once and for all.
Despite ongoing humanitarian aid reaching Gaza, the Strip is facing an extreme shortage of food, exacerbating the crisis that has persisted for more than 3 weeks.
Well, as you can see, the needs are great. The needs were great even before the current crisis. Before the current crisis, there were 1.6 million people inside the Gaza Strip who needed food assistance. Food insecurity was rampant inside the Gaza Strip.
Offering their support to Gaza, Indonesia has released the first batch of humanitarian aid, encompassing food and medical supplies. This substantial 51.5-ton shipment was provided by the Indonesian government in collaboration with various humanitarian organizations.
Amid the escalating tension between the Lebanon-based Hezbollah and Israeli forces, the residents at the Lebanese border with Israel are leaving their homeland. The tension arose when an Israeli military post was attacked by anti-tank fires. Hezbollah claimed responsibility for firing precision missiles on Israel. As per the International Organization for Migration, more than 30,000 Lebanese have been displaced since the beginning of the border tension. Lebanon's caretaker Prime Minister Najib Mikati met with US Secretary of State Antony Blinken in Amman on Saturday and emphasized the importance of working towards a ceasefire in Gaza and stopping Israeli aggression in southern Lebanon. Mikati also stressed Lebanon's commitment to international legitimacy and the implementation of UN Resolution 1701, calling on the international community to pressure Israel to cease its violations. Blinken, in turn, emphasized his efforts to halt military operations for humanitarian reasons and to address the issue of prisoners. Meanwhile, White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre has said the United States does not want to see the Israel-Hamas conflict expand into Lebanon. She said that Hezbollah and other actors, including state and non-state, should not take advantage of the ongoing conflict. The United Nations have renewed calls for a ceasefire in the Middle East. The world body's humanitarian head, Martin Griffiths, has told UN members that time is running out of thousands of Palestinians. He has called for immediate intervention from the international community. Jody Jacobs reports from the United Nations.
With the conflict in the Middle East now in its third week, United Nations staff, especially those on the ground, are worried. More than 70 of its staff have been killed, and it says providing humanitarian aid is extremely challenging due to the lack of fuel, the ongoing bombardments, and the destruction of its infrastructure. The United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs convened a meeting in New York on Friday, briefing member states on the situation in Gaza. Martin Griffiths, the UN's humanitarian chief, says close to 9,000 Palestinians have been killed, and says it's unclear the exact numbers as more could be unaccounted for under the rubble. But it's not only humanitarian aid that's a concern for the world body. It says the health system in Gaza is close to collapsing. The United Nations resident coordinator for the occupied Palestinian territories Lynn Hastings, says the health system is overwhelmed with an influx of injuries combined with severe shortages of supplies, personnel, electricity and water. Since the start of the hostilities, she says 40% of hospitals in Gaza, that's 14 out of 35, have shut. Meanwhile, the UN says UNRWA is also running out of money. It says the situation has grown so increasingly desperate, and the UN and its partners will release an updated flash appeal for more funds to last until the end of the year. Now, the UN has been unable in recent weeks to take any decisive, legally binding decisions on the conflict, as the Security Council remains paralyzed by veto votes and the inability to agree on appropriate language on a Security Council resolution. The UN General Assembly has, however, passed a resolution calling for an immediate ceasefire, but this is not legally binding. Jody Jacobs in New York, reporting for DD India.
Well, joining me live on this story is Mia Alberti from Beirut. Now, Mia, tensions are certainly escalating at the Israel-Lebanon border, where Hezbollah is continuously attacking Israeli positions. As per the reports we're getting, Israel then is retaliating to it. What's the latest there?
I mean, we just heard a few minutes ago the Israeli army saying that it has hit 2 terrorist cells operating in southern Lebanon that were preparing to launch an attack against Israel. That's according to the Israeli military. We haven't had any confirmation from Hezbollah or other Palestinian factions here in southern Lebanon. So we can continue to see this daily exchange of fire. And as you mentioned, it has been escalating in the terms of geographical expansion. We're seeing this conflict happening further and furthermore, both into Lebanese and Israeli territory, but also Hezbollah, continue to hit targets in Israel, mostly military targets, but using different weaponry. We're seeing the group using surface-to-air missiles. We saw this week the group was using explosive drones for the first time. So that's the kind of escalation that we are seeing. It does not correspond increase or a significant increase in casualties on both sides. But yes, the situation continues extremely tense, especially after Friday's speech by the chief Hassan Nasrallah.
Okay, Mia, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has promised a response of unimaginable magnitude if Hezbollah opens a second front in the conflict. Is there any evidence that Hezbollah is planning for a full-fledged attack or any report related to it?
Look, it is possible, but according to what we heard yesterday from Hassan Nasrallah, the head of Hezbollah, what he said was that Hezbollah was already involved in the conflict, that it will continue to, play its role as it is playing, that the type of violence that we're seeing in the border will not be limited to what it is now. So we could expect some sort of escalation, but we did not see a full-on declaration of war. So we are not expecting an increase in fighting or a significant increase in fighting in the next few days. But Hezbollah also warned that whatever happens in the border depends on what happens in Gaza. This is a warning that Hezbollah has done multiple times. So if we see the situation escalating in Gaza, then we could see an escalation here as well. But for now, if things stand as they are, we can just continue to expect to see this daily exchange continuing.
All right, Mia, on that note, thank you so much for joining in. Well, still to come on this edition of DD India Live. Russia and Ukraine claim new military actions against each other. Air quality deteriorates in India's national capital, Delhi. Air quality next remains in severe category.
Always welcoming. The vibe of Punjab is larger than life. Warm up to grandeur that's beyond compare. And history that's dotted with tales of bravery. Smiling soul of India, where music, art, cuisine and culture comes together. to create an unforgettable impression. Punjab is all set to win your hearts with its unique and colorful extravaganza.
You're watching DD India Live. I'm Siddharth Bharadwaj. Now, Tehreek-e-Jihad terrorists attacked an Air Force base in central Pakistan this morning. 3 aircraft and a fueling tanker were damaged after gunmen stormed the Pakistani Air Force training base in Mianwali, inflicting casualties. Pakistan military said clearance operation at the Pakistan Force base has concluded and 9 terrorists have been killed in the response attack. Meanwhile, Pakistan police have started search and cordon operations in areas where Afghans have been residing after the expiry of a deadline to expel all undocumented foreigners from the country. Dozens of foreigners, mostly Afghans, sat in a Karachi police station as they waited to be shifted to temporary transit camps. Police carried out a search and cordon operation in Junaiju Colony, a refugee settlement, where they searched more than 900 houses. Pakistan has brushed off calls from the United Nations, right groups and Western embassies to reconsider its plan to expel more than 1 million of the 4 million Afghans in the country, saying they had been involved in Islamist militant attacks and crimes that undermine the security of the country, which Kabul denies. Many of the migrants fled Afghanistan during the decades of armed conflict since the late 1970s, while the Islamist Taliban's takeover after the withdrawal of US-led coalition forces in 2021 led to another exodus. Both Russia and Ukraine claim to have taken new military actions against each other in their respective briefings. The Russian Defense Ministry said that in the past week that its army repelled the attacks of the Ukrainian army in many directions, including Kupiansk, Krasny Liman and Donetsk, and attacked a Ukrainian ammunition depot and also shot down over 10 fighters from the Ukrainian side, while the Ukrainian side said that its air forces carried out several strikes on the Russian air defense missile system and also attacked Russian electronic warfare systems. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen arrived in Kyiv on Saturday on a surprise visit. In a social media post, von der Leyen said that she is visiting the country to discuss Ukraine's accession path to the EU. Also, the EU's financial support to rebuild Ukraine as a modern and prosperous democracy. Meanwhile, the United States is set to provide $425 billion worth of additional arms and equipment to Ukraine for its ongoing fight against Russia's invasion. The package uses the last of the funds in the Ukraine Security Assistance Initiative, a more than $18 billion fund that allowed the Biden administration to buy weapons from industry rather than pull from U.S. weapons stocks. The USAI funds will be put toward $300 million worth of laser-guided munitions to shoot down Russian drones. China and the US held their first round of consultations on maritime affairs on Friday in Beijing. According to China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, both nations had an in-depth and constructive exchange on the maritime situation, maritime security and maritime economy. China has also raised concern about the United States' increasing regional military deployment, its frequent close-in reconnaissance against China, and its support for South China Sea provocations by other nations. Both leaders underlined that in order to prevent miscommunication and errors in judgment, they need to strengthen dialogue and communication. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese arrived in China on Saturday on a trip aimed at mending relations between the two countries. As Patrick Falk reports, he's putting trade at the centre of Australia's approach.
Well, Australia's Defence Minister Richard Marles described the sort of dilemma that his country faces when he was talking to reporters in Washington earlier this week, saying that China is Australia's greatest security anxiety. It is also its largest partner, with the world's second largest economy accounting for about a quarter of Australia's export earnings. That's more than its next three biggest trading partners combined. And Prime Minister Anthony Albanese intends to hit home with the message that trade is an anchor for stabilising relations between the two countries during his visit. Now, he won't be meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping until Monday, but he'll be attending a top imports convention in Shanghai today. He'll also be speaking with a large group of business leaders tomorrow. And it's got to be said that relations have improved considerably since he came to office, with China lifting most of the trade restrictions imposed in 2020 following a series of diplomatic disputes. And that improvement in ties comes also despite the fact that Australia has deepened its security alliance with the US, with Washington notably agreeing to sell nuclear-powered submarines to Australia under their AUKUS scheme. Prime Minister Albanese says he will raise topics of concern, and in particular tensions in the South China Sea, when he meets with President Xi on Monday. But experts say that despite the fact that the Albanese government has put dialogue at the centre of its approach, there is still a long list of differences, and the differences remain the same, essentially.
The United Nations Human Rights Committee has expressed its concern about legislative initiatives and practices that limit the right to legal abortion and voting in the United States. The committee issued findings on 6 countries, including the United States, on Friday. The committee expressed its concern about the increasing number of state-level laws and barriers that prevent women from accessing safe and legal abortion. This includes the criminalization of healthcare providers, family members and pregnant women themselves, as well as restrictions on related interstate travel, the prohibition of medication abortion and the use of digital surveillance. The committee has urged the United States to end the criminalization of abortion, remove and refrain from imposing new barriers to access to abortion, and to ensure that women seeking abortion care are not subject to digital surveillance. Migrants intercepted by a Senegalese Navy patrol boat Wallo protested, saying Spain or death, as the Wallo dispatched armed special forces in support of boats to ferry its 159 passengers to its ship, ending their desperate quest to reach Europe. French impressionist Claude Monet will go on sale at Paris auction for the first time in decades. The painting, displaying rare and trademark of Monet's style, was painted in 1886 and is expected to fetch up to €3 million in the auction. 2 snow leopards have appeared at the Bronx Zoo in New York. These leopards, listed as vulnerable by the International Union of Conservation of Nature, live in the highest areas of Central Asia. The cubs, 1 male and 1 female, have not been named yet. And extreme weather events are being witnessed across the globe. Here's our detailed report.
Countries across the world are witnessing extreme weather events. At many places, air quality has become a matter of concern. Breathlessness, irritation in eyes, itchy throats and coughs. This is how people of India's national capital, Delhi, are living in the month of November as a thick layer of toxic haze has descended. The air quality index continues to deteriorate into severe category in several parts. The government has announced an air emergency, shutting down schools and construction.
The AQI crossing 400 and going into severe category is mainly due to factors like combustion, due to the transportation, or whether it is the burning of the agricultural waste. Exposure needs to be avoided because pollution is directly responsible for many diseases. So the vulnerable population, whether it is the very old, small children, pregnant ladies, or people having already some respiratory conditions, they need to avoid as much as possible. They have any symptom, they should visit doctors to take treatment immediately.
India is not the only country battling these weather extremes. Wildfires and blazes are engulfing parts of Spain and Australia. Around 350 people had to be evacuated as a result of a wildfire that blazed close to the coastal town of Gandia in eastern Spain. Bushfires blazed across Australian states of New South Wales and Queensland, killing at least 2 and destroying dozens of homes. Storm Ciarán lashed northwestern Europe on Thursday, killing at least 7 people and forcing the Italian government to declare a state of emergency. Scientific studies indicate that extreme weather events are likely to become more frequent or more intense with human-induced climate change.
On a cricket World Cup match update between New Zealand and Pakistan now, it has been a run fest at the M. Chinnaswamy Stadium in Bengaluru as New Zealand have went past 350 run mark. In a must-win game at Bengaluru, New Zealand hammered Pakistan bowling. Rachin Ravindra struck the 3rd century in his maiden World Cup, while returning Kane Williamson blazed 79 ball 95. Till the latest reports came in, the Kiwis were at 360 runs with the loss of 5 wickets. Earlier, Pakistan won the toss and elected to bowl in their high-stakes match. New Zealand are currently 4th in the 10-team table with 8 points after their opening 4 wins were followed by 3 defeats. Pakistan with 6 points need to win to stay in contention for a semi-final place. All right, that's all for this edition of DD India Live, but let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. You can connect with us on Facebook, X formerly known as Twitter, and Instagram. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Siddharth Bharadwaj from all of us here in Delhi. Thanks for watching DD India Live.